Hello, I'm Ben Simmons and welcome to my shop. I'm here today with Mel Bryan and I'm going to be sharing with you a technique that I first heard of from John Lucas in a magazine from the American Woodturners Association that was just really intriguing to me. One of the things that he showed was how to use a router on the lathe. And that sounded pretty dangerous to me until I realized that no, he wasn't talking about a lathe spinning and routing and everything all at the same time, but using the lathe as a platform to really keep the work steady as you use a router and add some detail to what's going on. So for example, one of the things that we are going to be showing you today is how to put detail like this with this line technique on a vessel that you mount onto the lathe. Or, if you prefer flutes, how you can add flutes to a vessel along the way, all right here on the lathe, using the lathe as your platform, and changing your router bits and changing your router depth and technique to get the effect that you want. One of my favorites is one of the first ones that I did is the little pincushion effect on the top of this hollow form. And basically it's just the lines out with a V router bit, and it was very simple to do, but it helped me to get more familiar with the technique and learn what you can do and what probably is not a good idea to do. As a final thing I'll show you before we get started, this is a little hollow form vessel, and what we did is take the V router bit and very close put lines or channels into that vessel. I hope that that shows up because it's kind of a dark piece, but it's one of my favorites. I really enjoyed doing this one. Okay, let's talk about what we need to do. I'm going to start in a little bit of backwards. I'm going to be showing what we're doing, and then I'll switch back and show you why we're doing and how we're doing what we're doing, if that works for everybody. What we're going to be using is called an indexing wheel. You can make these yourself. You can buy or order a template or get it for free on the web, or you can spring for a little bit of cash and just get one out of the box that's already done. This one is done by Ron Brown. Ron Brown does some interesting, pretty good quality stuff. It's made out of heavy-duty plastic, and it's a wheel with lots of holes punched all the way around the edge. And the holes are calibrated to give you different settings of 16 segments per round, and this one goes clear on down to 120 segments per round. So with the kit from Ron Brown, you get two of these wheels, one that starts at 16 and goes up, and then one that goes from 60 to 120. I have not used this one yet. I'm not that dedicated to this process, and what I'm going to be showing you is the easy way to get into this. There are lots of complicated ways to do it and ways that you can spend a lot of money to do this. What I would say is if this intrigues you and what we show you today looks interesting, start simply, start cheaply, work into it, and if it works for you, play with it a little while, and you'll have a better idea of how deeply you want to get into the process and how much you really want to commit to it. One of the tools that we're going to be using is a router. And this is just a trim router. This one is from Harbor Freight. It's the cheapest one that they sell. And basically what I did is took all of the gizmos and gadgets off of it and tossed it in the trash right over there because it really wasn't that very good. But the motor works very well, and all the switches and everything are very handy, and it's just the right size to run for a project like this. I built a little sled, just some plywood, a couple of Craig screws in here to serve as a dust bumper up against the rail that I'll show you, and a couple of aluminum straps across the top so this doesn't go anywhere. Sanded down the bottom so it's nice and slick, not too slick, but slick enough that I can slide it on my platform. That said, we've got a project over here that I want to talk to you about, and I'll show you how this works, and then we'll move on and show you how the innards of this system work. Okay, what we're using today is a round nose bit on this little vase that I've created. The vase is poplar. It's very cheap wood, but it's good to use to get to know the system. When you're using a router, poplar tends to shred a little bit around the grain. You have to do a little more sanding and finishing, but it's excellent to practice with, and you don't feel guilty that you're burning up a really high dollar piece of wood when it suddenly blows up on you or things come loose. So we're going to go from there. What we've got is a vessel, and I'm going to put flutes into it similar to something like this. Okay. And I'm going to be putting in 16 flutes. I've already decided or calculated that 16 is the appropriate number to go around this vessel. All you have to do is figure out how much space each flute is going to take up, add however much space you want in between, and you can calculate how deep you can go and all of that. We'll talk more about that later if that's okay with you. I'd like to get into this and see how it works, all right? What we've got is a pencil mounted on a block that matches the router. The tip of the router is centered exactly on center of the piece. You can do that using the tailstock. And again, I'll show you how to do that in a little while if you're still interested. What you do is you can set up with your pencil and mark along the vessel. And then over here you've got this little pin, and all you do is turn to the next segment, and with your pencil you can mark where that segment is going to go. Once again, pull the pin, move the segment, plug it in, and go here. Now I want to give you a word of warning, because before we start playing with the router and all of that, there's a nasty habit that a lot of us get into, and it's called throwing the wrong switch. Unplug the whole lathe. Everything should be unplugged back here. This lathe is not a working motor lathe at this point. I don't want to accidentally turn down here, look down here and say, okay, I'm ready to go, boom, and everything is all locked down over here. It's probably not going to break the lathe, but it may break some other things along the way. So just to be safe, this is a project where your lathe is a standalone clamp and the electricity is off. The only electricity we've got now is going to be going to the router. Okay, I've set up my lines. I know where I'm going with this, I hope. And let's see what happens. There we go. I've got a little rail that runs right along here that serves as the bumper. I've set this router up so that it enters at the back of the vessel right down here, and as I come through it will clear and not put the fluting on up at the top. I just want the fluting to go right around here. So we're keeping it simple. Let's see what happens. Okay, now we're going to plug in over here. I think we can find one more power spot. I don't like to plug in the router or anything else until it's ready to go, because I don't like accidentally throwing switches and having them come on and surprise me. Now, very light stroke. You don't have to do this all at once. But since it's already set up down here on my guide, it will get to depth. And we'll stop. Now Mel, I don't know if you can see that in there or not. I'm going to turn this up a little bit higher. And we've got one flute in the back. Let's do another. Now, as I watched John Lucas doing this, he did something that actually he was doing some amazing things, so I don't want to badmouth John Lucas, except that he has a habit. He leaves his router on while he moves to the next flute, and the router kind of vibrates around on the table. That scares me, because that thing comes off. Your instinct is to try to catch it. No. So I have really tried to school myself to always turn the router off and let it stop. I don't know if he's gotten over that habit yet or not, but if you see John Lucas doing a video, you may see him running that router just a little longer than is comfortable, but he does some beautiful stuff.
Well, Ben, I've got a question.
Yes, sir.
How did you calculate how deep to go?
Well, it's interesting. You can vary it, but it's set from the fence here, and if you use little spacing sticks, like popsicle sticks, you can put them down in there, and when you get to the top, and you've got 1 or 2 sticks, and that's fitting right against the surface of the vessel, you know that's how deep it's going to go. And if it's a curved surface, then it's going to enter at some point, and it's going to exit at another point, and hopefully it's going to be pretty close. If the vessel has a little bit of undulation in the side, it's not quite on center, they're going to vary a little bit, and you'll notice that in your own turning. So we'll see, we'll do 2 or 3 more and see how we're doing here. See? That was pretty good. Okay, let's go 1 more. And once you get into a rhythm of this, it moves pretty quickly, but don't rush it. The wood will wait for you, and better to have a nice clean cut where you want it than to get one that takes off on you. Hopefully you see the pattern emerging over there. Now, one of the things that might occur to you is, okay, so what if you've got a curved surface and you can't run it out one end and out the other end to get that nice flute like that? You can build little ramps and things that would fit down here on your table that are going to help guide the router into a cut or out of a cut. Or you can, like a moon shape that would follow the outside of a vessel. If you want to put a nice flute all the way around a rounded bowl, all you have to do is match the curve of the vessel, cut a little piece of plywood, clamp it down there, and it serves as your guide to bring the router around. You can also plant stops on your table, here or over here, that will keep the router from going too far. So if I want to end a flute and just lift it out, I just put a stop right there. That's as far as it goes. And I see that I'm picking up some dust and things down here on the table. Just keep things as clean as you possibly can. But the two little screws that I've got in here tend to be a dust buffer too. They keep the chips from interfering with the table saw. As you go around the vessel, depending on where you are with the grain, you'll get different reactions from the grain also. Some of the vessel will turn very smoothly and others may kick up and flare just a bit on you. Just be aware of that. There's nothing wrong with that, and you're going to be able to sand most of that out later on if you're inclined to do that. I think you can also see why I have not gotten into the 120 segment thing yet. This is, I think, extreme patience. Now, it may occur to you, if you're doing a hollow form, if you set this bit deep enough, you could be going right through and into the vessel itself. Yeah, you may want to do that, or you may not want to do that. Just take that into consideration, and we'll talk more about that in a little while.
Yeah, Ben, I have a question. What bit sizes are best, or how do you really?
I've got really a couple of round nose bits that I figured would be good. I've got a 1/2 inch, and this is like a 3/8 inch round nose. The V-bits that we'll be using very shortly come in different degree settings. The first one I got was like a 60-degree bit, and it did nice looking V channels, but it didn't fit very well into the next project I needed, where I needed 90 degrees. And so I was very careful to look on the side of the bits. I found a Freud bit that's the square. It's got the 90-degree corner on it, and it cut beautifully for that. I'll show you one of those very shortly, but that's most any bit that you want is going to be fine, depending on the effect that you want. This is really starting to look pretty good. I'm liking the effect on this little vessel. This one may make a good Christmas present for Aunt Tilly. Okay, mission accomplished on this vessel. Let's set this over here so I'm not going to knock it off accidentally. And let's take this out of the vise now and see what we've got. Okay, here we go. Is that close enough, or would you prefer a little closer?
That's fine.
And like so. And of course, since this is poplar, there's a little bit of whisker right in through here that some fine sandpaper is going to knock off with no problem. What you'll want to do then is put some sanding sealer over the whole vessel and sand it again to get rid of that shredding or that fuzzing that you get with the poplar. You don't have to do that with all woods, but it would make a lot smoother cut. But there you go. And then you can come back in and do just about anything you want. But that is a very nice looking little vase.
Very good.
Now, I can see the wheels turning now. How can I work with that? Well, one of the things that you're going to find, I told you you could cut through. Here's one that is a cut through vessel, but what you need to do is leave some support on the back so those wings don't start flying off and breaking on you. Depending on the wood, you'll get cleaner cuts. Depending on the wood, you'll need a larger or a smaller support ring underneath. If you're doing a large vessel, you could have 3, 4, or 5 different support rings that would give a pattern underneath, and then have the lattice effect out here. You could put the lattice effect coming up the whole side of a bowl so that the outside is cut, and then you leave the support rings on the inside of the vessel to keep those rings from flying apart. You could do a vessel, the one that I really like and I'm planning on doing, is just a straight canister-like vessel that has very thin lattice work down the side, cut all the way through, but again, leaving the small support ring on the inside of the vessel. It takes a delicate touch. I tried one, and I was about through with it, and then for some reason something came loose over here, and it started wobbling, and it all went, I said, well, drat, I'm going to have to try that one again sometime. But this is an intriguing thing, and they don't always have to be spirals out, and I'll show you that in just a couple of minutes. Here's another one that I did for a different demonstration. This one has some color added to it. It's basically just a ash bowl. It's been turned, and on the back side I've done straight flutes, just exactly like we were just doing, and on the front I've used the V tool to get this kind of an effect. Now you say, wait a minute, how are you getting that pinwheel on there? If the bit is centered on a vessel like this and you're doing the top, then you get that daisy effect. If you put the bit above center or below center, you start to get an optical illusion of these V cuts that start above center and go to the outside. Well, when you do that, what happens is you get the illusion like this that you're pinwheeling. You're really not. These are straight cuts that start slightly above center and go to the outside. Does that make sense? I hope it does. I can see the wheels turning. I like this. This project is so cool. What happens if, when you make your cuts, you glue something back into them and then finish a vessel? Well, you can get something like this. This is an ash vessel with a 90-degree Freud bit to cut the V grooves, and then African mahogany glued into each one of them, and then put the thing back on the lathe and turn them down, smooth them down, and you can cut the ends, whatever. But it's very simple to do, but it takes a lot of patience. It takes some time to get this thing done. But once you do, people are going to say, well, that's cool. Okay? So that's part of what really intrigued me about this project. Let me show you something else. This vessel that I was showing you earlier has the flutes going down the side. I dropped in here and then ran out the side here. So there's a very definite dimple in and then up so I could leave the base like so. I did that, I'm going to say I did that on purpose. Actually, it was just serendipity, it did happen. But this vessel looks very much like this vessel did. It's just a very simple hollow form. And I could do the same effect if I wanted to on this one. I think I'll leave this one plain and we'll do that in some nice color or something like that a little bit later. But from one to the other by adding the flutes on the lathe. Now, let's try something else here. Okay, now what we want to talk about is some of the detail on how we're doing the setup and why and what's happening. The indexing wheel goes onto the lathe behind the chuck, and you make sure that that chuck comes up nice and snug against the wheel. That lets it turn like so. You have a bracket that attaches to the rails down below, just like a steady rest or any other accessory that you're going to be putting on this, and a series of holes in it that you select which one you want to use for the very vital piece of equipment, this little pin. Now, for some reason, Ron Brown sends extra nuts and bolts and attachments and wheels and everything else, but he only sends one of these pins. Don't lose it, or get a nail and a block of wood and you'll be doing fine. Now, we're all set with that. This indexing wheel, you choose the ring that you want to be using. I'm still in the 16 ring because that's going to go faster today, and because for the projects that I chose to show you, that's going to work better. What I did also is for this next set, I've changed to a V-bit to give us that 90 degree, and this is the Freud bit. I looked very carefully until I saw a 1/2 inch 90 degree bit, and that's what we're going to be working with. There's a 60 degree bit that I like also, so this is not necessarily an ad for anybody, but you will get different patterns and different types of response from different equipment. That's part of the fun. Okay, let's make one of those little pin cushion things. Again, I want to show you, before I adjust it too tightly, what I'm working with. This is the table that I made. I have an extra tool post right down here on the bottom that goes through and bolts into the top. I have a guide rail that I've clamped across the front. This is all high dollar stuff, guys. This is plywood I had hanging around the shop. And then I've got some stops clamped down, and my other stop is just one of these little squeeze clamps over here. It stops when I want it to stop on that one project. This whole thing drops into the banjo guide right down here. Now I want to show you, you don't have to be nearly as elaborate or use these high dollar tools that I've got here. This was my first one. It was just a chunk of plywood that I had, and I turned an oak rod, used a little glue, and that's a deck screw right down in there, and it worked beautifully. And my investment in getting into this and giving it a try, practically nothing. Okay, let's see if we can drop this back in. Come on, Jet. There we go. Let's put the router back over here. Now, we can either center this, and remember, if we center it, what kind of a pattern are we going to get? That daisy pattern straight out. If we have it off center, we're going to get the pinwheel. Move this on in. Again, I can come down here and pretty much guess what dead center is, or if I really want to do it the easy way, what I can do is put my tailstock in and match it up with the tip of the router bit. And be pretty much dead on center. I think that we've got everything all ready now for this really detailed project. I've got some ash tied up in this demo project. It's scrap. It's got cracks all in it. Hopefully it's not going to blow apart. I've got the 90-degree V-wedge in here, and we're going to just go right on around, again using 16s, and see what happens. And I can see the wheels turning out there. What happens if instead of a router, you want to lock down a Dremel? Ah, not bad. That could work too. Be interesting to play with. Hopefully you can see that we're getting the daisy pattern. I'll call it the daisy pattern. Now, since this is a demo, let's change things up a little bit. Let's raise this up to about there. How deep? I don't know. Let's just guess. Let's go a little deeper than that. That should be interesting. Okay, the next one then, we've changed the setup, we've raised the center point for entry, and we've changed the exit point so it'll give a different depth of cut, and it's going to give what looks like a different angle of cut. Now you say, oh wait a minute, you just went across one of your other cuts. Well yeah, as a matter of fact I did. So what's that going to give you as you change a cut and maybe make two across the same way? Little checkerboard. Little angle. See, it gets more and more interesting, doesn't it? One more, we will. Have a look at it. Put that over so I don't hurt myself. Let's take this out. and see what we're starting to get. Now over here is where we started cutting through the daisy pattern that we were getting for the pincushion effect like this. And then we cleared and started getting just the pinwheel effect right here. Okay, so you can use any of them, and that's giving a pretty good clean cut on that ash, even though it's junky ash. So you might want to play with that, but could get some interesting diamond cross hatching and everything else if you set that up right. It could be a lot of fun to work with. Now let's do one more, just for fun. Same kind of a drill. We're going to put this in, lock it down. Now this gets to be a lot of fun if you're doing a 17-inch platter and you decide that you're going to put 120 cuts around the edge of it. You're going to be here a while, but let's bring that down to about there. That's good. It's going to go through there, and it's going to exit out the outside of the cut. Okay, what we're going to do, and we're above center, so what kind of a cut is that going to give us? It's going to be that spiral looking cut. It's going to enter just inside of the rim ring that I have cut here in a little dish, and it's going to exit so that it leaves a pattern on the outside. I can set it differently, or once I cut the pattern, I can return it to cut that edge down so it's not dropping off the edge or anything else that you want. And remember, as you cut these, you can also modify by putting stuff into them. This is just wood, but those of you who are interested in epoxy, all that glittery epoxy stuff or anything like that, the jewels, could be really interesting in a small vessel. Really would pop with that kind of a thing. So let's give this one more try. At this point is that you're really getting into wider sections. Well, that's just because you're moving to a larger vessel. So as you do your calculations, if you want narrower types of rings, instead of 16s, you're going to do 24s or 32s or whatever else you'd like to set. It's your vessel. You do whatever the heck you want, huh? As a matter of fact, I saw one being done, and I said, you know, if they just stopped right there, that would be absolutely awesome. It's that asymmetrical stuff. You don't have to go all the way around a rim. Or I could go to the other side and put in chevrons on that side, glue some stuff in there that's going to be matching or contrasting colors. You could do some really interesting things there, couldn't you? So that's kind of where we're going today. I hope you've enjoyed this session. Again, Harbor Freight, cheapest one they've got, get a coupon. Scrap plywood or Metro hardwood, I'll put in a plug for them. This is good stuff. Don't mess with that stuff at the big box. Go to Metro, buy your good quality. It's not that expensive and it will last, and if you decide you're going to do something else, you can take it apart and use it for something different. Freud bit, It is excellent, does a great cut, and I prefer that 90-degree just because it's more flexible. And the Ron Brown indexing wheel, or free on the web if you really want to print out your own and make your own. I figure I would rather be turning and making stuff than trying to make this tool, but then other people are the engineers who really like building the jigs and the gadgets and things. Whatever you'd like. Hope it's been useful. Gang, hang in there, and I want to see some pictures of these projects posted up if you do them. Thank you very much, and Mel, thanks a lot. Really appreciate being with you today.
Thank you.